The US has spawned an entire generation of kidults that simply refuse to grow up. Michael Snyder reports, do you know any adults still living at home with their parents? If you're like most Americans, you probably know lots of them. Sadly, this is because the percentage of young adults that are living with at least one parent has been trending upwards for decades. Of course, the cost of housing is one factor that is driving this phenomenon. At one point in 2022, housing was more unaffordable than it had ever been in the entire history of our country. So the truth is that many of the multi-generational households that exist today have formed due to economic necessity. But in other cases, kid adults that simply refuse to grow up have moved back home with mom and dad because it's easier than trying to live independently. Thanks to the kidult trend, approximately half of all U.S. adults in the 18 to 29-year-old age bracket are currently living with at least one parent. In July 2022, half of adults aged 18 to 29 were living with one or both of their parents. This was down from a recent peak of 52% in June 2020, but still significantly higher than the share who were living with their parents in 2010, 44% on average that year, or 2000, 38% on average. So what do parents think about all of this? Well, some like it, but even more don't like it. The share of adult children who live with their parents has ticked up in recent years. This just in, the parents don't like it. A recent Pew survey found 2/5 of dads believe parents hosting adult children is bad for society, while only 12% think it's a good thing. Moms agree, albeit to a lesser degree. Overall, the Pew survey discovered that Americans have very mixed feelings about this phenomenon. Over a third of Americans, 36%, say that more young adults living with their parents is bad for society, while 16% say it's good for society. Nearly half of Americans, 47%, say it does not make a difference. Of course, every story is different. Some adults are living at home because they just cannot afford homes of their own. These days, millions of young people graduate from college with massive amounts of debt, and when all of that debt forces them to go back to living with their parents, they are referred to as boomerang kids. If you're a young person that has been financially crippled by loan debt, I certainly don't blame you for trying to save money so that you can turn your life around. Ultimately, trying to get out of debt is really a really good thing. But of course, there are millions of other young adults that simply refuse to grow up. In fact, they have become so numerous that the toy industry has created a special term for them. They call them Kidults. And these days, they are spending billions of dollars on toys. There are two things keeping the toy industry afloat right now: inflation and a consumer group known as Kidults. These kids at heart are responsible for 1/4 of all toy sales annually, around $9 billion worth, and are the biggest driver of growth throughout the industry, according to data from NPD Group. Have you ever met an adult that has a special room for all of his Star Wars collectibles? Well, I know personally an economic professor who had a room where he had an airplane simulator. So that's what relaxed him, and he was playing every night. Anyway, with the blessing of his wife, of course. Now, going back to this, so if so, then you probably have a really good idea of the type of person that I'm talking about. Kidults are shelling out so much money for toys that toy companies have actually begun to create product lines just for these consumers. Kidults who tend to spend more money on toys have a great fondness for cartoons, superheroes, and collectibles that remind them of their childhood. They buy merchandise such as action figures, Lego sets, and dolls that might typically be considered for kids. However, in recent years, toy makers have created product lines just for these consumers, realizing that demand is high for this generation of adults who still want to have fun. I'm all for fun, for having fun, but this is getting ridiculous. Sadly, men are much more likely to be kidults than women are. Needless to say, this is one of the reasons why many women find it so difficult to find somebody suitable to marry. The labor force participation rate for men has been trending down for decades, and meanwhile, the labor force participation rate for women has been trending up for decades. Of course, the systematic emasculation of the male population is another reason why this has been happening, but that is a topic for another article. Once upon a time, it was extremely unusual for an able-bodied male to be doing nothing if he was capable of working. But now we have millions upon millions of men that have simply dropped out of the labor force completely. Some of those men are now living with their parents, and that is not good for our society. Unfortunately, as economic conditions deteriorate, even more young adults will move back home with mom and dad. According to a Wall Street Journal poll that was just released, approximately 2/3 of Americans believe that the nation's economic trajectory is heading in the wrong direction. A majority of voters think the economy will be in worse shape in 2023 than it is now. Roughly 2/3 say the nation's economic trajectory is heading in the wrong direction, the latest Wall Street Journal poll shows. The survey, conducted December 3 to 7, suggests a recent burst of positive economic news, moderating gas prices and a slowing pace of inflation, have not altered the way many feel about the risk of the recession, something many economists have forecast as likely. The coming year is definitely going to be quite rough, and the outlook for beyond is even worse. As the economy crumbles and global events spiral out of control, we are going to need men to be men. But a lot of these kidults out there simply don't want to be men, and that is extremely unfortunate. It's finally here, Michael's new book titled End Times, now available in paperback and for Kindle on Amazon. About the author, my name is Michael, it's Michael Snyder, and my brand new book entitled End Times is now available on Amazon. In addition to my new book, I've written 6 other books that are available on Amazon, including 7-Year Apocalypse, Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, The Beginning of the End, and Living a Life That Really Matters, commissions earned. When you purchase any of these books, you help to support the work that I'm doing, and one way that you can really help is by sending copies as gifts to family and friends. Time is short, and I need help getting these warnings into the hands of as many people as possible. I've published thousands of articles on the Economic Collapse blog, End of the American Dream, and the Most Important News, and the articles that I publish on those sites are republished on dozens of other prominent websites all over the globe. I always freely and happily allow others to republish my articles on their websites, but I also ask that they include this about the author section with each article. The material contained in this article is for general information purposes only, and readers should consult licensed professionals before making any legal, business, financial, or health decisions. I encourage you to follow me on social media, Facebook and Twitter, and any way that you can share these articles with others is definitely great help. These are such troubled times and people need hope. John 3:16 tells us about the hope that God has given us through Jesus Christ. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. If you have not already done so, I strongly urge you to invite Jesus Christ to be your Lord and Savior today. This is by Michael Snyder on the Economic Collapse blog. Please leave your comments, and thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box